Hey, this is Mike Zwick from If Not For God podcast. Our show, Stories of Hopelessness Turned into Hope. Your chosen Truth Network podcast is starting in just seconds. Enjoy it, share it, but most of all, thank you for listening and for choosing the Truth Podcast Network.
This is the Truth Network.
Coming to you from an entrenched barricade deep in the heart of central North Carolina. Masculine Journey After Hours. A time to go deeper and be more transparent on the topic covered on this week's broadcast. So sit back and join us on this adventure. The Masculine Journey After Hours starts here, now.
Welcome to Masculine Journey After Hours, and we're in the middle of just an exceptional topic. I wish we had a bump. We
could have played yours.
No, I'm teasing you. It's water under the bridge.
Hey, you got that one right.
I did.
Yeah, water bridge. Mining
for
works.
fruit. Yeah, we're not mining for fruit this particular show. And I did have something additional wrong in the last show. If you listen to the radio show, and now we're in the After Hours, but it's Bourne Ultimatum, not Bourne Supremacy. Not that anyone out there probably knew other than Andy, but I wanted to go ahead and say that. But the topic we are talking about today, Jim, is yours. Second week in a row. That's a big achievement. And so tell us about that.
I'm pretty sure he's not going for 3, but we'll see.
Maybe.
This is, and you can take your pick. This is hearing from God, hearing God's voice. We are talking about talking to God.
Listening to God. Yeah.
And sadly, most people in prayer are 90% of talking to God, and I resemble that remark, and 10% of listening, but the reverse would be a much wiser course. And I guess I can just keep talking.
Yeah, because you have the first clip.
We're going to start with my clip.
We are. Yes, we are.
Is pretty self-explanatory. It's Jesus talking to the Samaritan woman at the well. One thing to look for, you'll hear... if I could read my own writing, you felt unworthy, Jesus saying that. That is a pretty big gap between that sentence and what came before, which is Jesus telling the woman all about her husbands. And it takes her from being, cocky and angry to being broken, which often is a necessity to actually hear what God is speaking to us. So we're ready to play.
I'm here to break those barriers. And the time is coming when neither on this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father.
So, where am I supposed to go when I need God? I've never received anything from God, but I couldn't thank him even if I did.
Anywhere. God is spirit. And the time is coming and is now here that it won't matter where you worship, but only that you do it in spirit and truth. Heart and mind, that is the kind of worshiper he's looking for. It won't matter where you're from or what you've done. Do you believe what I'm telling you?
Until the Messiah comes and explains everything and sorts this mess out, including me. I don't trust in anyone.
You're wrong when you say that you've never received anything from God. This Messiah you speak of, I am he, but you felt unworthy.
Why are you doing this?
It would be good if you believed me.
You picked the wrong person.
I came to Samaria just to meet you. Do you think it's an accident that I'm here in the middle of the day?
I am rejected by others.
I know, but not by the Messiah.
That, I guess I could have just said when the dramatic music starts, is covering the gap. That is such it's always been a favorite verse of mine, of Jesus' stories, but what you get from the chosen version fills it out to the point where I cannot watch that entire scene without getting choked up. And the point is, of that is that she had screwed up so much in her life. She did not feel like God would have anything to do with her, and she didn't want anything to do with God. She did indicate that, that was other people's fault for the way they treated her during that time. But everybody out there has, at one point or another, been hurting and felt like, and many of us feel like our self-inflicted wounds have separated us from God, and we can't talk to Jesus. We can't talk to God. But he makes it very clear in this passage that he is spirit. We can do it, as we pointed out before, 24/7, every day of every year of our life. And if we feel unworthy to, we won't hear from God if we don't think we will, or we'll hear from him very little, and those will normally be dramatic. I was hearing from God when I was I'd always believed in God, but I never really thought I'd hear from him. And even when I was far from him, there would be times. But if we're seeking him, seeking the relationship with God that he wants with us, then we're going to hear from him a lot more often, and we'll have his peace and comfort in these tough times. And it got cut off because I hit the 2-minute limit. But right after this, she is overjoyed and said, he told me everything I've ever done, and goes rushing to the village, dropping her water and telling others about him. And I think that is an ultimate outcome to us hearing from him.
So for those that aren't familiar with the story or just heard it a little bit, why was it such a big deal, A, that Jesus is in Samaria, and B, that he's talking to the woman at the well?
Well, Jesus is Jewish.
Right.
This is probably one Robbie should start setting up, because he knows it intimately. But basically, Jesus is Jewish. Jews do not have anything to do with Samaritans. They're half-breed rejects. They live in the wrong place. They worship the wrong place. They're actually considered worse culturally than those that are not Jewish at all. I mean, they're at the very bottom of what's going on. And when they first meet, she's saying, you shouldn't be talking to me. I'll make you unclean by giving you water. I mean, it's really, she recognizes that it's taboo for him to talk to her, and yet he engages her and brings her to a point where she loves him and is excited about having that relationship.
Yeah, it's another, lack of a better term, Jesus picking a fight against the culture.
Yeah.
Right. That he says, I don't care what the culture says.
Being a woman is awful. He's not even supposed to talk to women.
Right. That back in that time, that would not be appropriate. Right. And so there's a lot going on there, but it's Jesus battling for the heart.
Yeah. And just on the point of him being in Samaria, none of his disciples, at least on the chosen part, but probably the real life, Samaria was really, it's a shorter way to get to Galilee where they were headed, but it was through Samaria. Usually they went like 15 or 20 miles out to the east around it. And they're just, he directly wanted to go through there for a reason. He had an appointment to meet her, a divine appointment.
Yeah, and keeping in mind that, it's not a 20 minute drive.
Right.
20 miles is a significant walk.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
Good times on a donkey.
Yeah, or sandals in the desert. Yeah. So, Andy, you're actually up with the next clip, and it's from the Bourne Ultimatum. And to be very honest, it says right here on the computer, Bourne Ultimatum. I just didn't read it.
You didn't read? Oh, okay.
Yeah, I can read. I just didn't read it.
We can't blame it on the eyes now because
they're fixed.
They're fixed.
Yeah, okay. It's the attention span.
So, yeah, this is from this is from the Bourne Ultimatum, and this is a scene where Jason Bourne is this CIA operative, and the CIA has got a unethical or unlawful program going, and there's this journalist that's been reporting on it, and Jason Bourne knows about it, and he's trying to protect him, and he gives him a phone so he can kind of give him directions because they're being followed by this CIA group. And really it's just a scene that's pretty visual, but you should be able to pick it up. you'll hear Jason Bourne talking to Ross. That's his, the journalist. And then you'll hear these CIA director and talking to his team as they're monitoring this guy, and they're trying to catch him and get to him because he's considered the informant, or they're trying to find out who his informant is. And I'll talk a little bit more about the spiritual mapping to that when we get back.
We have to move. Answer your phone. You got a visual?
Where the hell is he, people?
Do exactly as I say. Need you to move up to your right. First escalator on the right.
Tie your shoe. Tie your shoe right now. Tie your shoe.
Wait.
Wait.
I'm gonna walk by you. I want you to move along the far wall to your left. In 4, 3, 2, 1, stand up. That's it.
You cannot afford to lose this guy, people.
All right, that line you're on is good. Stay on that line. Stay on that line.
Oh, the bin man. I think he's one of them.
The garbage man? Negative.
Oh, Jesus, he's reaching for something. Oh, God, he's got a gun. He's got a gun.
Stay on the line
He's
you're
got a gun.
on. Do not deviate.
Okay,
There he
goes.
goes. Here he goes. Tell grab team A, go.
He's still talking with somebody.
Getting instructions. Jimmy, get me the conversation.
Lock the box. Lock the box. Moving grab team C.
Hurry, Ross. You gotta move. Okay, move through this crowd. Move through this crowd. Get on cover right now. Move through this crowd. Get in the store. There's someone on your tail. Get in the store.
You're going to proceed out the east exit. That's to your right as you come into the store.
Head into the liquor store in front of you. Go into the back and lock the door.
Mobile force down. This guy's got help. Tell me when the asset's in the nest.
Get me a feed in there. I want grab team C in there. Tell me what's going on.
That's Jason Bourne.
He's picking us apart. Do you think he's the source?
He's got to be.
So it's probably hard to follow there, but really you have Jason Bourne just talking. I mean, it's like the voice of God to us at times. Now, these guys weren't close. They weren't friends. It's not like the relationship we have with God, but there's some parallels to the direction God wants to give us as his children. He's just constantly telling him, what turn to make, go up the escalator, tie your shoes, those kinds of things. But, some of them are like spot on. Wait. Well, how many times do we need to just slow down and wait on God? We've talked about it a lot. Be still and know that I'm God. And there's just a lot to that. I think in my spiritual walk, that's one thing I've done. I used to be so much just jump out. Again, it goes back to that kind of orphan spirit. I've got to control everything myself. And why wait on God when I can go do things myself and, ask for his blessing after the fact? But that wait really means a lot. The guy from the CIA is talking about Bourne, and the Ross, he says he's talking to somebody. This guy's got help. It's evident that he's got help. It should be evident that we got help, that we have our Father helping us. And then near the end, you hear Bourne, you hear that scuffle. Bourne's fighting for him to protect him. Well, what you don't see in that scene is he goes on in that the Ross actually gets killed because he didn't follow the directions. And that's what we are when we don't follow directions. But it all comes out of relationship of hearing God. If you try to, like Jim said, the relational part of it is foundational. But what relation do you have where you don't have bidirectional communication? What kind of relation can you expect between a husband and a wife, a father and a child, mother and a child, whatever? I mean, you've got to have that relational aspect to it. And anyway, I thought that was a cool clip on learning to listen. And that's still a difficult time I know I hear from God on a regular basis, but I know that I probably could do it a lot more by getting still and listening.
So question, when do you guys find it harder to listen to God, when you're in a sense of urgency, or, it's just everyday kind of thing?
Well,
yes.
Yeah, that's right. The textbook answer, at least from the guys at Wild at Heart, is that urgency, that pressure on you, that's going to be hard to hear. So learn to hear on the things where there's less pressure on it, and you begin to be accustomed to hearing that voice. And then when you enter those times of pressure, that you can fall back on what you know. You've heard it before. My sheep hear my voice and they follow me.
That's good advice, but where do you struggle?
I mean, I definitely struggle with the part of trying to get an answer when I really, in that urgent space, that urgent place, not space, but I guess it's easier now because I think just in my growth and my spiritual walk that I feel like I have so much more trust in the relationship that things aren't just as urgent anyway. Knowing whose you are takes a lot of that pressure off. But with that being said, I would much rather make decisions in a non-urgent or need to know right now type of environment.
Yeah, and if you ask God about your non-urgent issues, maybe you avoid some of the urgent issues.
Yeah, that's true too. Was that avoidable or unavoidable suffering? Is kind of the byproduct of that?
Yeah, that's directly from that particular topic.
I actually would go a different direction.
Okay.
But that's not unusual.
No.
Figuring into your nuts. But unlike, Rodney said yes, because I think when the ox gets horribly in the ditch, like when I was crushed between the two cars, it wasn't hard at all to hear from him because that was all you got. I mean, and I know that my fallback will be, and I would imagine everybody's will be, that if something truly horrific happens to you, he comes in loud and clear like you just can't even believe. You won't have any trouble. Now, when you're going to him with something that you feel like is urgent, that's another story altogether, But true urgent issues, there's no doubt in my mind that you won't have a struggle like, I wonder if that was, you're going to know when it's really, really, something tragic just happened to your wife or your one of your children or something like that. He's got a special comfort. There's no doubt in my mind. But my agenda being urgent, those are a bit challenging. And then the other one is actually, for me, my biggest struggle. It is just the moment by moment. What I'm really hoping, to take this lesson from Jimmy Stewart and literally, have him there with me in the mundane.
Yeah. You guys answered the question I asked. I want to ask it differently, though. It wasn't about hearing God, about listening to God. When do you find it more difficult to listen for God is really the question I meant to ask, right? And you answered that at the second part. It's in the everyday thing, right? When something feels urgent, yeah, I definitely want to lean into him then because I'm out of my own answers potentially, right? But I don't ask him about the stuff just daily that I really need to ask him about. I'm getting better at it, right? And life's becoming less urgent at times and more avoidable avoidable suffering, right? I'm having less of that, hopefully. But it's in those everyday decisions. I mean, if I ask him, am I going to eat a hamburger every day at lunch, I'm probably going to deal with other issues if I don't listen at some point, right? I'm going to deal with some health stuff.
My answer didn't change between hearing and listening. And it is both, but it's when I'm at the extreme of both. If God is the only way I'm getting out of this dramatic, terrible situation, listening, well, it depends upon how you define them, and it's done different ways, but that doesn't matter. I'm hearing and listening. Or when I am at peace and reflecting on God, and I know I'm in his presence. That's, if I don't fall asleep, I'm hearing or listening.
Yeah,
at that time.
There's definitely a difference. For any of you that's been married, I promise if you talk to your wife, there's times that you hear, but there's a lot of times you don't listen.
Oh.
That's a very myopic attitude, Sam.
It is very myopic. Yes, it is.
That's one of those almost absolutes.
Yeah. That's a distinction I make between it is I may hear, but am I really truly listening? And that's a different thing. Andy, you got something you want to add?
I jump over to obedience myself.
Yeah.
That's the first place I go. I'm hearing this. It's like, okay, are we going to obey?
Yeah.
Are we going to do what God says to do? Yeah. And that comes back to our Carol saying, know the word, then you know what to really go to obey.
Yeah.
another textbook answer from Wild at Heart, but I think I found it to be true as well. This is Robbie's talk that I'm getting into here, I think, for the next. But the whole idea of, and it's what Rodney was talking about with the obey, but it's the whole idea of surrender. Am I willing to hear yes or no on whatever I'm asking? A lot of times it's, God should buy this house or not, or whatever. If you've got your mind made up, you're not going to hear, God's voice. You're going to hear your own, and it's going to get in the way. And I find myself, because God's proven himself over time, much more comfortable with surrendering that and going with it, because I realize he really is the smartest guy in the room and I'm not.
Yeah. For me, I think a lot of it was orphan spirit to begin with. I'm going to do it my way, and if it didn't work, I'll ask God, and live my life way too long that way. I think becomes more now is I still kind of have this belief, God's got a lot going on. I'll just, and it's silly, right? But, I don't think to ask him when I should as much, and that's getting better, and I think that'll grow over time. But it's being more thoughtful about, okay, before I make the decision, before I jump in the pool, God, is this a good idea? You might not want to.
Yeah, for me, it's a lifetime of habit.
Yeah.
Always made the decision for myself. I never looked to God. And then I come to Christ and I'm like, oh, there's another option other than just me?
And there usually is.
And I just forget. And then how hard is it after I've already made a decision on something? Yeah, God, what should I do? I can't hear anything because I've already made my decision. I'm going down the road. So like you say, learning to do it earlier first, it's hard, but it helps.
Yeah, I want to avoid hey, God, can you help me bail out of this particular thing?
Yep.
I promise I'll learn from it. It won't ever happen again. Well, David, did you have something you want to say?
No,
you just had that look on your face.
No, that's just my look.
Okay, no problem.
It's just my face.
It's just your face.
Yeah.
Well, thank you. We appreciate you being a guest again this week.
I appreciate you guys having me.
So I do have a clip, and it's from Field of Dreams. And yes, I know it's an old movie, and I'm not going to ruin anything in it for you. But in this particular clip, towards the end of the movie, when everything's starting to make sense, when it all kind of comes clear, the whole journey that he's been on, that Ray's been on through the process, and his wife and the people around him that don't understand what they're doing, now it makes sense at the end, but in the middle, it sure wouldn't have. Right, it looked like a bunch of crazy activity, crazy decisions, and then it kind of comes to fruition. And so let's listen to this clip where Ray kind of figures out what the voice has been telling him and why, and then we'll come back and talk about it.
If you build it, he will come.
What is it?
It's my father. Ease his pain.
Go the distance.
I only saw him years later when he was worn down by life. Look at him. He's got his whole life in front of him, and I'm not even a glint in his eye. What do I say to him?
Why don't you introduce him to his granddaughter?
Hi.
Hi.
I just wanted to thank you folks for putting up this field, letting us play here. I'm John Kinsella.
I'm Ray. My wife, Annie. This is my daughter, Karen. Karen, this is John.
Hi, John.
Hiya, Karen.
Well, we're gonna let you two talk.
Hey, Dad? You want to have a catch?
I'd like that.
Yeah, that was a 6-minute clip to try to cut down into 2 minutes, and so there was a lot that I had to take out. But the part that I focused on, and the whole point of this movie, once you've seen it, and you go through all these things that don't make sense, the first one is, if you build it, he will come. I have no clue what that is. And so he goes and he kidnaps a sports reporter guy, and it's like, okay, this makes no sense, but then it becomes clear a little bit more, right? And along the way, then eases pain, and he goes and gets this doctor who ends up stepping back in time and playing baseball, and there's this pieces of the journey that Ray's just obedient on, to use your word, Rodney. He's just obedient, going, I don't know what this, but it feels right. It feels like this is bigger and deeper than me. And the whole goal of this whole movie, of this whole journey, was to lead him back to the Father. In this case, to his natural father, right? And in our case, to our natural father, meaning God, not our earthly father, right? But to our natural father. And the whole point of the journey is to lead us into deeper relationship. Jim, you talked about watching the Chosen clip and being moved, and that was a great clip. It really was an awesome clip. Even though I've seen this movie a handful of times, I was still moved to tears watching it yesterday, and it was one of those things that we talk about on the show of saying, okay, God, why? Right? But you have Ray that only knew his dad in later years when life had kind of beat him down. And you don't know a whole lot about the relationship, but you do know that it wasn't what he had hoped it would be. And so God was reminding me of, when I was born, I was not expected. It was a surprise, accident, whatever you want to call it. I don't feel like an accident, but I was not expected, right? And my dad was 49, and then by the time I was 12, he'd had a stroke and couldn't talk and couldn't do things and had to do a fair amount to help take care of him. And so, I would hear these stories of my dad playing against the Harlem Globetrotters, back in the day, or riding rodeo and all these cool things and some really cool things about my dad, but I never got to know him in that way. And so my heart really moved to Ray being able to spend some time with his dad playing catch. As much as my dad loved baseball, I never played catch with him. So I'm looking forward to the day in heaven when my dad and I can play catch, when my shoulder's good enough and he can throw. We're going to have a great time. But anyway.
I wanted to do the contrast of these two, and we snuck it in. But God gives you a lot of details, or he gives you very little and leads you on between those two clips. So don't expect one or the other when God speaks.
Yeah, it's and.
Yeah,
it's and. Well, thank you for listening this week. Go to masculinejourney.org to look up any upcoming events. We do have the boot camp coming up for advanced. Also, we have more. We'll talk with you next week.
This is the Truth Network.